The internet is a place of endless possibilities, connection, information, entertainment, but beneath its surface lies something far darker. Stories that blur the line between the virtual world and reality. Stories that remind us of just how vulnerable we can be, from a babysitter's terrifying encounter to a Craigslist deal that spiraled into a nightmare, and finally, a chilling experience on the dark web. These true stories will stay with you long after the screen goes dark. So, lock your doors, dim your lights, and let's begin. I was a babysitter back in high school, and I thought it was the safest job I could ever have. But one night, everything I thought I knew about safety and comfort changed forever. It was supposed to be an easy evening. I'd babysat for this family plenty of times before, and nothing unusual ever happened. The parents were heading out for dinner, and as always, they gave me the same instructions. Bedtime at 8 o'clock, snacks in the kitchen, and the back door needs to be locked. I always made sure to double check that door, and I did that night too. After dinner, I played some games with the kids, tucked them into bed, and made sure they were fast asleep. The house was quiet now, the kind of silence you'd expect in a safe, suburban neighborhood. I settled on the couch, flipping through channels and scrolling on my phone. That's when the phone rang. When I answered, there was nothing. No voice, no background noise, just silence. I said, "Hello?" a couple of times, but there was no response. I hung up, assuming it was a wrong number. 10 minutes later, it rang again. The same thing. Silence. I stayed on the line for a few seconds longer this time, waiting for someone to say something, but no one did. That's when I started feeling off. By the third call, I didn't even answer. I turned the ringer off because honestly, it was starting to get to me. I tried to focus on the TV, but every little sound in the house, every creak of the walls or groan of the floorboards, started making me jump. Then I heard it, a creak. It came from upstairs. My heart skipped a beat. The kids were supposed to be asleep. It had to be one of them, I thought. Maybe they got up for water or had a bad dream. I grabbed the baby monitor and listened, but it was silent. I decided to check on them, just to be sure. The stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed, and I was hyper aware of every little sound. I peeked into the first bedroom. The little boy was fast asleep, his chest rising and falling peacefully. I checked the other room. The girl was sound asleep too. I started to relax, but as I turned to head back downstairs, I heard it again. Another creak. This one wasn't coming from the kids' rooms. It was coming from the guest room at the end of the hallway. I froze, every hair on my body standing on end. It didn't make sense. No one else was supposed to be in the house. I took a few cautious steps toward the guest room, my breath shallow and my heart pounding. I pushed the door open slowly, the hinges groaning softly, but there was no one there. The room was completely empty. I hurried back downstairs, trying to convince myself that it was just the house settling. But as I passed by the back door, my blood ran cold. The door was unlocked. I knew I had locked that door. I knew it. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone and called the parents. I tried to stay calm as I explained what was happening, but my voice was trembling. They told me to get out of the house immediately and wait for them outside. I didn't even grab my coat. I bolted out the front door and locked it behind me. Standing there under the dim street lights, I kept looking back at the house, half expecting to see someone staring at me through the windows. When the parents arrived, they searched the house with flashlights, but they couldn't find anyone. That's when the father noticed something that made my stomach drop even further. There were muddy footprints leading from the kids' bedrooms, down the stairs, and out the back door. The police came and searched the house and the yard, but there was no sign of a break-in. Whoever it was hadn't forced their way inside. It was like they'd been there all along, waiting. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The calls, the creaks, the unlocked door. Someone had been in that house, walking around upstairs while I was there, while the kids were asleep. I never babysat again after that. It started with a simple Craigslist ad. I was selling an old couch, hoping to make a little extra money. It seemed innocent enough at the time, but I had no idea that this small decision would spiral into one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. I posted the ad on a Sunday afternoon. Within an hour, I got a reply from a man who seemed polite and eager to buy. He asked a few questions about the condition of the couch, agreed on the price, and said he could come by the same evening to pick it up. Everything felt normal, at least at first. That evening, he showed up on time, just as he'd promised. He was polite, friendly even, and helped me carry the couch out to his truck after inspecting it. He handed me the cash, thanked me, and drove off. I remember thinking, that was easy, but it wasn't over. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. It was him. I was caught off guard. I hadn't invited anyone over, so seeing him standing there made me uneasy. He smiled and said he thought he might have left something inside the couch, keys, a wallet, or something like that, and asked if he could come inside to check. Immediately, my gut told me something wasn't right. The way he lingered at the door, the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes, it all felt wrong. I told him no, firmly, and said I hadn't seen anything. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at me through the screen door. The way his eyes locked on mine made my skin crawl. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he shrugged, said, "All right, maybe I'll check my truck again," and walked away. I watched him leave, thinking that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I found a note on my doorstep. At first, it was cryptic, just a single sentence. "I'll be seeing you soon." I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was a prank. But then, another note appeared the following day, and this one was far more unsettling. "I'm watching you." My heart sank. It couldn't be a coincidence. I couldn't prove it, but I knew the notes were from him. Over the next week, I started noticing strange things. A car, a dark sedan, was parked on my street for hours at a time, always in the same spot. At night, I'd hear faint noises outside, like someone walking near my window. I tried telling myself it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew I was being watched. The breaking point came one evening. I glanced out the window, and there he was, sitting in his car across the street. He wasn't even trying to hide it. He was staring directly at my house, his face barely illuminated by the glow of his phone. That was it. I called the police, shaking as I explained what had been happening. They took me seriously and told me to stay inside while they sent someone to patrol the area. A few days later, I got a call from the police. They'd arrested him after one of my neighbors reported seeing him lurking in their yard. What they found on him was even worse than I'd imagined. He had a notepad filled with disturbing details about my life, notes about when I left the house, when I came back, and even what lights I kept on at night. He also had photos of my house, taken from different angles, as if he'd been circling my property. I thought I was just making an innocent sale, but I had unknowingly let someone dangerous into my life. I've sworn off Craigslist ever since, and if I ever sell anything again, I'll only meet buyers in public places. Looking back, I realize how lucky I was that nothing worse happened, but the fear, the paranoia, that still lingers. A simple transaction can sometimes lead to something far more sinister. For me, that lesson came at a price I'll never forget. It all started on an uneventful night when I found myself wide awake in front of my computer, scrolling through random internet forums. I'd heard the rumors, the stories about the dark web, the hidden, mysterious part of the internet where anything goes. Most people warned me to stay away, but part of me wanted to know what was really out there. It wasn't that I was looking for anything in particular, just curious. How bad could it be, right? I wasn't expecting to find anything too out of the ordinary, just maybe some illegal content or dark web gossip. But I was wrong. So wrong. I knew I'd need special software to access the dark web, something called Tor. I downloaded it, feeling a strange mix of excitement and unease. Once I was set up, I dove right in, starting with some basic forums. At first, everything seemed normal. People talking about tech stuff, video games, conspiracy theories. Nothing too different from the surface web, really. But then, I stumbled upon a link to a live streaming site. The description was vague, just a few cryptic words that promised unfiltered reality. I clicked it without thinking much about it. At first, the stream was nothing special. It was a grainy black and white video of an empty room. Maybe I should have left then, but I didn't. I kept watching, waiting for something more interesting to happen. And then it did. A figure suddenly appeared in the frame, being dragged into the room. My heart skipped a beat. The person's hands were tied behind their back, and their mouth was gagged. They struggled, but they were too weak, too disoriented to fight back. I froze, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. The camera's grainy quality made it hard to see their face, but it was clear enough to realize this wasn't a prank. This wasn't scripted. I felt a surge of dread, my pulse racing. I knew I should exit the stream immediately, but my hands were frozen to the keyboard. It was like my mind couldn't process what I was witnessing. The figure in the room began to scream, muffled by the gag, and then the screen went black. A message appeared on my screen, just 4 words. "You shouldn't have watched that." I stared at the text in disbelief, the words burning into my mind. My body went cold. I tried to click away, but the screen froze. Panic set in. What had I just seen? Was it real? Was someone going to come for me? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that I had opened a door I shouldn't have. My computer began acting strange. The cursor moved on its own. Files opened and closed at random. I tried shutting it down, but it wouldn't respond. The more I tried to regain control, the worse it got. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to disconnect from the internet, convinced that whoever was behind that stream could see me. But even after shutting down my computer, the fear didn't go away. The next morning, I took drastic measures. I wiped my hard drive completely, erasing everything, my files, my history, my accounts. I destroyed the browser I used and deleted every trace of my online presence. I thought that would be the end of it. But the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. It lingered. Even months later, I still couldn't shake the paranoia. I started double-checking every lock on my doors, every corner of the room. Every time the phone rang, I jumped. I stopped using my personal email and deleted my social media accounts. I even changed my internet service provider, hoping that would somehow help. But deep down, I knew I couldn't undo what I'd seen, and that knowledge haunted me. I couldn't stop thinking about that figure in the room, the fear in their eyes, their desperate attempts to break free. It didn't make sense. Why did I see it? Why did I have to be the one to witness it? I don't know who that person was, or if they're okay now. I'll never know. But one thing I'm certain of is this: the dark web isn't some harmless curiosity. It's a place where boundaries are crossed, where real horror happens behind closed doors. Some doors are better left unopened. Some places on the internet are better left unexplored. Because once you see the darkness, it's hard to unsee it. I still get nightmares sometimes, and every time I hear a strange noise, I can't help but wonder if I'm being watched again. I'm not sure I'll ever be truly free from the grip of that night. But I learned my lesson the hard way. If you're thinking about diving into the dark web, just don't. It's not worth the risk. Thank you for watching. If you found this story chilling, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime and horror stories. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video.